I always look forward to my vacations in the Florida Keys. If you like variety in the fish you pursue, few places can equal what you'll find here, and especially the celebrity species like bonefish, tarpon, and permit. So I can afford to spend more time fishing, I camp at one of the 3 state parks in the Florida Keys. Being I tow a camper, I can't tow a boat, so I have to use a folding boat, which gives me a little bit more range than using a kayak. Once the boat is assembled, it's a simple task of putting on removable wheels and pulling it to the nearest beach. Depending on what my plans are for the day, I can either use a kayak paddle, an electric trolling motor, or an outboard engine to get me where I'm going. Another useful accessory is a sonar to help find fish holding structure in unfamiliar waters. And there's lots of water out here to search to find where the fish are at. But 4 things that have always helped me is first, finding an area that has moving current, and I prefer an incoming tide. And that moving current will bring number 2 on the list, which is clean water. The other thing I like to do is to find a flat where there's a good transition zone from shallow to deep. And then also the other thing I like to look for is an area where there's both grass and open areas on the flat. With those 4 items, you'll usually be successful. And once I found a flat that met the criteria, I anchored up the boat and was ready to catch some fish. And it didn't take long for the fish to show up. On my second cast, I hooked into the first bonefish. Normally I like to drift across the flat, but today it was so windy I anchored. And when you do anchor, one thing that you can do to increase your odds of catching more fish is to put out a chum slick. So what I did is I put out about 4 or so shrimp right when I started fishing, and then about once every maybe 2 to 5 minutes I put out another piece or 2 of shrimp to attract fish closer to the boat. This bonefish ate a 3-inch white paddletail fished on a 1/4 ounce chartreuse jig head, and to give the bait some scent I put on some shrimp procure. After catching the first bone, I took and I threw out a piece of shrimp on a 2/0 hook with a little split shot on it behind the boat, and then I started casting my artificial, and just about as soon as my artificial hit the water, I had another fish on the live bait hook. So while I'm fighting the bonefish, I had to also reel in my other line so it wouldn't get tangled up with the line that I had the fish on. It was a real 3-ring circus while reeling in one rod, fighting a fish on the other, and trying to keep my balance. Fortunately, everything worked out and I was able to enjoy seeing another nice bonefish up close. I love how a bonefish lights up in the sun. And after a brief photo shoot, it's back in the water until we meet again. During the whole morning, I never moved more than 100 yards along the edge of the flat, but in this short area, I caught all kinds of varieties of fish. Here we've got a small jack caravel. Next up is a great eating fish called a mutton snapper. And next out of the emerald water comes the mangrove snapper, which is a close cousin of the mutton snapper, and it also is great table fare. One way to tell a mangrove snapper from a mutton snapper is that a mangrove snapper does not have a dot on its side. To add to the fishing excitement, on a healthy flat like this one, you're going to run into some toothy critters like sharks and barracuda. This is a bonnethead shark. A lot of people confuse a bonnethead with a hammerhead shark, but if you look here, this bonnethead has a very rounded head. A hammerhead has a very sharp angled head. It's like a rectangle almost, and on each end of the rectangle is where the eyes are located. What I'm doing here is I'm positioning the shark so I can get my hand as close to the back of the head as possible so I can get the hook out of it. I never like leaving a hook in any shark if I can, and I'm also using some forceps to pull that hook, again, to protect my fingers and also to protect the shark. On any flat you fish in the Keys, you're going to run into a fair number of barracuda like this one. They'll range anywhere from around a foot all the way up to maybe about 5 feet long. By the time you get any barracuda to the boat, they're going to be pretty spent, and the safest way that I've found to dehook them is pretty much just like a shark, is grab them right behind the head so they can't swing around and bite you. And then use something like the forceps or some other type of hook remover to get the hook out safely. That time the hook almost just pulled out by itself. Another popular place to fish is around the bridges, and here in the Keys you're going to find lots of them. Here we're at the Bahia Honda bridges. We're looking now at the old bridge, and then I'm going to go ahead and swing around the camera over here to the new bridge. You'll see several boats over there, and what they're doing is that they're fishing for tarpon. Favorite baits for tarpon include pass crabs, mullet, pinfish, and ladyfish. We saw plenty of tarpon on this trip, but we just couldn't get them to eat. The water was a lot dirtier than what we normally experience here, and that's what I'm blaming it on. We did catch a lot of snapper under the bridges, like this yellowtail snapper, and even though it may not be good to eat, this grunt sure is photogenic. On those days when it's too windy to go out into the Gulf or the Atlantic, don't forget about the canals. They provide a lot of protection from the elements and also have some great fishing in them. To find the most productive places to fish, I'm looking for structure, like downed trees or mangrove roots. Also, the shade given off by docks and mangroves will help concentrate fish. In canals, I've had a lot of success using something that's called a Ned rig, which is a very light jig head, usually about 1/10 of an ounce, with about a 2.5 inch long plastic body on it. Here, the color that I'm using is a white paddle tail. Besides the fish, you'll find a lot of wildlife in the canals, like this white heron, even some manatees, or an oddity like this sea slug. But the thing you gotta watch out for are these doggone iguanas. This one dropped out of the tree and almost into my boat. And then after giving me a heart attack, it just swam off. These iguanas are descendants of somebody's pet. They're an invasive species that threaten the native animals of this area. But even so, they're interesting to watch. Besides fishing, one of my favorite pastimes in the Keys is snorkeling. The mangroves provide a beautiful and protective nursery for many forms of aquatic life. Within the submerged roots, you never know what you're going to see. And about 100 feet away in deeper water, we found this jellyfish feeding on the bottom. Nearby, a boxfish swims through the grass looking for its dinner. and a snapper looking for some groceries as it goes by a sponge. After a relaxing swim, a nice walk on the beach is pretty good too. And just feet off the dry sand is a school of nurse sharks swimming by looking for food. In one of the tidal pools, we found this hermit crab. Just off the beach, someone had stuck these sponges on a tree to dry in the sun. When they were building Henry Flagler's railroad from the mainland to Key West, they had to dig several quarries to get the stone and rock that they needed for fill for the railroad bed. These quarries today make great places to explore. To find these quarries, use Google satellite maps and look for square or rectangular dark bodies of water just off of the main road, like these two here. Besides finding some great places to fish, you're going to find some interesting marine life, and then also the other thing that's really interesting here are the fossils like this brain coral. Windley Key State Park showcases one of these quarries along with the equipment that was used to excavate the coral. If you have an extra day, head on down to Key West and catch the high-speed shuttle to Fort Jefferson. One way, the trip will take you about 2 hours, and you'll go through some of the prettiest waters as you head to the Dry Tortugas and Fort Jefferson. Fort Jefferson is the largest brick masonry structure in the Americas. It was built to protect the sea lanes around the Straits of Florida. Now it provides a location for some great snorkeling, fishing, and sightseeing. This uncompleted fort, located 68 miles west of Key West, encompasses about 16 acres, used over 16 million bricks, and was designed to house and support over 1,000 troops. Another trip has come to an end, and I've only scratched the surface. If you have any questions, please post them here on the video. Please like and share. And if you haven't already joined, please subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the next adventure.